Okay, so good morning. My name is Melanie Schade. I work in Germany for the Federal Institute on Research for Urban Affairs, Spatial Development and Building. And I am also the Vice President of the European Platform on Mobility Management. And in my job, I lead a group. We are the Competency Center for Rural Mobility. And so I'm very happy to be here today and speak to you. And also Andre's presentation was very good to set the stage. And I actually, in my presentation, want to move back at first a step and talk about what are some of the main differences we see from urban areas and rural areas. So if we talk about sums and planning, what do we need to consider when we talk about planning for mobility in rural areas? And so basically it's not the mobility going to the city, but also the local mobility. So thank you. Can you move to the next slide? So when we talk about rural mobility, this is an image we often have in mind. It's an empty bus stop in the middle of nowhere. So there is not a lot of service because the distances are very far, and it's kind of empty. So when you move back and look at some of the frameworks we are dealing with, on the next slide, I have the settlement area. So we often deal with a dispersed settlement area. The distances are long between the villages, so there's often no comprehensive transport service. And that, Andre said it already, so that means there's limited public transport service to go to some of the main services. So to go to the doctor, to go to work, to culture activities. And so this is a problem we see in a lot of rural areas. So on the next slide, I have put together some of the challenges. Like I said, no comprehensive public transportation service. The demographic change is something we have to deal with. So we often have a lot of elderly people living in urban areas and rural areas. So how do we provide service for those people? And then also there's a mobility disadvantage and a strong car dependence. So people who have a car, they use it often, but for those who don't yet have a car or not anymore, it's very important to provide services and have mobility services for them. So how can we address some of those particular challenges we see in rural areas? If you move to the next slide, please. So there's no single answer. It is very dependent on the situation of the local area, how we can provide service. So we need a low threshold multimodal connection to close the gap, to have an analysis. What kind of service do we have and how can we complement the service with different modes of transportation? And the next slide shows one of those. So this is a small bus in a rural area. It's small so that you don't have to move large vehicles for long distances, but have a more on-demand service and cater to the people who actually need the service and be more flexible and be able to run it more often. And so this on-demand services often supplement the existing longer distance public transportation services. And also in villages, what we often see is that volunteers play a crucial role. So we have different associations or where people living in the area are working on providing services. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is also an example of sharing mobility in a village. So there's a car in a village and sharing of cargo bikes and bicycles, and have it also in the local area and help people not to have to use the car, but using shared services. The next slide, please. It is also very important to think about the target group, like I said in the beginning. So it's people who probably don't have, never had a driver's license or don't have it anymore. So for elderly people. So this is an example where a senior taxi was put in place. It picks up seniors to go to cultural events or shopping and helps them being mobile. And on the next slide, we have the same for youth. So people who don't have a driver's license yet. So there's a taxi for youth so that they can be brought. Even sometimes we have it in the evening so they can go out in the evening or go to sports events. And the next slide is a fun example. So this is an example of an e-rickshaw. So this is a rickshaw service which was put in place in a village to move around elderly people to go to shopping, cultural events. But this is also an example that would be quite an eye-catcher for tourist areas. So where it would be fun to take the service. And on the next slide, I have put together those requirements for rural mobility. Like I said, it's important to have flexible mobility offers, multimodal connection, and also innovative solutions, and also digital solutions like apps. They help a lot to connect those services and put them seamlessly together. And the next slide. I want to give you some food for thought for the workshops that are coming. So I want to put this all together and give you some ideas. So we have the workshop themes. The first one, legal and regulatory contextual conditions for promoting new mobility solution in rural areas. There, on the next slide, I want to show you something we put together in my group, in my work. So it's called Mobilicon. It's an online solution because we saw that there were a lot of research going on in what are the solutions in rural areas, but it was not put together. It was like you had to try and find them in some reports. So if you go to the next slide, please. So on this website, how it's built, it's there are measures. So we took the measures away from the practical examples and basically listed how can I implement a measure, and it's for communities, municipalities to help them to put in place those measures. So we put together what is a measure, what can it be used for, and what would make it successful, but also what are some challenges to put in place. And then also if you want to put together like a bus, on-demand bus or something, you need to adhere to the legal framework. So what are some of the instruments, which legal framework do I have to consider, where maybe is funding available, and what is the planning framework. And then implementation aids. So, and it's also for every offer. If nobody knows about it, nobody will use it. So it's important to have marketing, but also first, when you put it in place, to ask people what do they want and what do they need. So to involve them, engage the citizens. And then we have a lot of practical examples where we show where the measures are already successfully implemented. And the next slide. So the other is the influencing rural sensitive mobility policies in planning at regional, national, and European level. So on the next slide, I put together some example where this is already happening. So there are some topic guides which put together. So one is sustainable urban mobility planning in smaller cities and towns, where it's already broken down how SAMs can be implemented in smaller areas. And then also from the European Platform on Mobility Management, we also were involved in putting together this topic guide on integrating mobility management for public and private organizations organizations into sums. So we looked also for different areas like mobility management for business, for example, but also for tourist areas, how smartly putting together the services, how it can help improve mobility and also put this, what you have, basically make it more efficient. There are also some examples for national funding programs. For example, in Germany, the German Ministry of Digital and Transportation, they have a funding program for SAMs, and they put it out for all municipalities. They didn't have a threshold of a certain size of a municipalities. With the funding program on purpose, they addressed all municipalities so that also small municipalities have a chance to get funding. And then in France, there's national guidance on a simplified mobility plans. They call them PDMS. It's also taking the SAMP principles, but making it more easy to implement in rural areas. And we can go to the next slide. And planning arrangements for rural development. There, I have on the next slide a picture, so we can talk about different planning options. So this is a photograph of a bicycle trail, which is used for commuting. So, for example, if you want to improve the connection between rural areas and urban areas or mid-sized cities, so for example, commuting bicycle trains would also improve the mobility. And on the next slide is just an example for digital solutions, so which we talked about before, to put together services and make it easier to book on-demand services. And the last topic of the workshop theme is mobility and tourism, cross synergies, involvement of stakeholders and planning. There, I want to give you also an example. This is a picture of Usedom, which is an island in the Baltic Sea in Germany. They have a big program with bicycle sharing. So they have a big network, lots of bicycles for locals and for tourists, to give opportunity that also tourists that come to the city, a lot of the hotels, they are also promoting that people should come with a train, and they can move around also with bicycles or buses. On the next slide. This is a picture in the area close where I grew up. This is at a train station in a rural area in Germany, and there that is it looks like a box where you can buy cigarettes, but it's actually for tires for bicycles. So there in the back of the picture you have some shared bikes, and also to provide low threshold services for tourists that come there and ride their bicycles, that if they have a flat tire, they can easily go and have those stations to fix their tires. And the last picture is it's a guest card, basically. So a lot of the tourist destinations are offering guest cards where tourists that come can use the local transportation, the buses, to move around and to reduce the necessity to arrive by car. So these are some of ideas setting the framework for today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion this morning. Thank you.